This Civic Media podcast is sponsored by UW Organ and Tissue Donation. Organ donations are desperately needed, and now is the right time to become an organ donor. Talk to your family. Get the dot. Save lives. Go to heroicdeed.com.
This is your WLAK Daily News Roundup for Lake Air, 107.5 FM and 1260 AM in Amory.
For WLAK News, I'm James Kelly. Superior and Duluth area lawmakers are expressing concerns about the future of the Blatnick Bridge reconstruction project following an executive order signed by President Donald Trump. The executive order put a pause on all funding through the bipartisan infrastructure law. It requires agencies to submit a report for review within 90 days to receive the promised federal funding. Senators Tina Smith and Tammy Baldwin criticized the pause, while Congressman Tom Tiffany speculated the reconstruction project will still receive the funding eventually. The Wisconsin Supreme Court has declined to hear a case regarding the bottling and sale of water from a well near Lake Superior. Crystal KLR had initially requested a conditional use permit for the harvesting of the water in April of 2021, but the request was quickly denied by the Bayfield County Planning and Zoning Commission. The company had planned to build a water pumping facility in Clover Township, which drew criticism from environmental groups and tribal leaders seeking to protect the quality of the Lake Superior waters. During his State of the State address on Wednesday night, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers announced new emergency rules to protect residents from lead poisoning. The newly enacted emergency rules lower the definition of lead poisoning to 3.5 micrograms per deciliter, clearing the way for more aggressive action to cut down on potential sources of lead poisoning. Lead poisoning has many documented negative health effects, especially for children whose brain, kidneys, nervous system, and blood can suffer significant damage. A cable man accused of assaulting a law enforcement officer during an OWI investigation has entered not guilty pleas in Barron County Circuit Court. According to court documents, 19-year-old Alexander Wright was charged with felony battery to a law enforcement officer and 2 counts of felony bail jumping. Wright was the passenger in the vehicle pulled over on December 1st and allegedly became combative as an officer conducted a field sobriety test of the driver. He's facing up to 6 years in prison if convicted on the battery charge. Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers delivered his 7th State of the State address on Wednesday night, declaring 2025 as the Year of the Kid. In his speech, Governor Evers outlined a number of policies, programs, and initiatives aimed at making Wisconsin's youth smarter, healthier, and safer. He also announced policy proposals to restore the 48-hour waiting period to purchase firearms and invest in comprehensive mental health services. Republican Assembly Speaker Robin Vos called for spending cuts and a tax cut in the party's response. A new study by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources found that chronic wasting disease could begin impacting the overall deer population. According to the study, areas where chronic wasting disease has a prevalence rate of greater than 29% in female deer will start to see a decline in population. The study tracked over 1,200 deer to analyze survival probability for infected and uninfected animals. DNR officials have turned to baiting and feeding bans across western Wisconsin in an effort to halt the spread of the disease. A Duluth paper plant has received nearly $2.4 million in state funding to help clean up contaminants at the facility. The Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development announced the grant funding earlier this week, which is meant to offset the cost of contaminant cleanup by up to 75%. Officials from the Sofadale paper say they're planning a huge expansion to double the size of the facility, but needed to clean those contaminants first. The $200 million expansion would include new warehouses and a converting facility. A large fire near a wood pellet manufacturing plant and freezing temperatures left Hayward area fire crews battling a blaze for hours earlier this week. According to fire officials, the fire started at a bag house at the Lignetics of Great Lakes wood pellet manufacturing plant on Highway 63 near Hayward. Freezing temperatures also reportedly caused difficulties in getting equipment and hoses to function properly during the blaze. Crews were on the scene from around 9:30 p.m. on Monday to 1:30 a.m. on Tuesday when the fire was extinguished. The Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction has announced it will pause hiring and out-of-state travel amid budget constraints. In a memo sent to staff on Friday, the agency announced it would freeze hiring for all jobs except 2 critical positions through the end of June. They also announced a pause on out-of-state travel and that it would consider voluntary reductions in paid working hours if requested by individual employees. Officials cited a $2.3 million reduction in state funding as a major factor in the decision to reduce spending. A new proposal with bipartisan support in the Wisconsin state legislature would make all gun safes exempt from the state's sales tax. Lawmakers say they're hoping the legislation will encourage more residents who own firearms to keep them stored securely in their homes, reducing the risk of accidental injury or that children will be able to gain access to the firearms. The legislation comes as Governor Tony Evers announces plans to include comprehensive gun safety measures in his biennial budget proposal that will be released in February. For WLAK News, I'm James Kelly.
It's the Bucks and the Heat. Hi, I'm Mike Clemens with sports. The Milwaukee Bucks flew back today after getting snowed out in New Orleans last night. Their game against the Pelicans to be rescheduled. Tonight, they're at home against the Miami Heat. The Bucks have 13 games left before the All-Star break, 9 of them on the road. At 24-17, can they hold on to that fourth place spot in the East? Damian Lillard.
We got to be there mentally. We got to be engaged. We got to be disciplined, and we got to be together.
NFL former Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson held his first press conference as the new head coach of the Chicago Bears.
I've got tremendous amount of respect for the coaches and the players in this league. Having competed against them for the last 6 years. Dan Campbell, Kevin O'Connell, you're talking about two guys that are up for Coach of the Year awards as the season ends here. And to be quite frank with you, I kind of enjoyed beating Matt LaFleur twice a year.
That's the Bears' Ben Johnson. With sports, I'm Mike Clemens.
On your entertainment beat, I'm Pete Schwaba. If you're headed to the theaters this weekend, here are some options that might be worth checking out. Brave the Dark is a drama about a teacher who connects and forms a friendship with an outcast student who he learns has been living in his car. There are not a ton of reviews in yet, but it's got a batting average of about 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. There's also a new Mark Wahlberg movie called Flight Risk. The mystery thriller is directed by actor and maniac Mel Gibson. When you've been in so many films in this genre, it's important to change things up. So Wahlberg thought he would appear bald. Interesting? Nope. No word yet if this movie is any good or not because there are no reviews out, which is always a red flag. Translation, Flight Risk is a film risk. Spend wisely. Another possibility in the mystery thriller genre is Inheritance, a film about a girl who finds herself in the middle of an international conspiracy after learning her father was a spy. Sounds exciting, but just a handful of reviews and batting about 50% on Rotten Tomatoes. Let's go to the movies. Fans of Abbott Elementary, which should include everyone, will be excited to hear that the show has been renewed for a 5th season. News comes on the heels of good winter ratings and a crossover episode with It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia that drew over 8 million viewers. The show is about an underfunded inner-city Philadelphia public school and has great laughs. Abbott Elementary airs Wednesday nights at 7:30 on ABC. Star Wars might be about to get a little more dreamy. Sure, Deadpool and Wolverine director Sean Levy is on board to helm, and people seem happy with the script, but it's the rumors that Ryan Gosling will lead the cast that's gotten everyone excited. If Gosling signs on, the film will start principal photography very soon, according to The Hollywood Reporter. In other Star Wars news, The Mandalorian and Grogu is headed to theaters summer of 2026. Anyone else having trouble keeping these films straight? Netflix is raising its rates again by $2.50 a month, regardless of plan. This comes despite the streamer adding 18 million new subscribers in the fourth quarter of 2024. Why would they raise their rates while adding so many subscribers? You'll love this. Netflix says they have to raise their rates to make more content. Yes, they think we aren't very bright. I would have thought they were using that extra money to fix buffering issues from celebrity boxing matches and NFL games. Suits is proving to be one of the most bingeable shows on TV. It now has a popular spin-off called Suits LA. Clever. The show has just announced a slew of guest stars who will appear during the first season, which includes stand-up comedian Patton Oswalt, Fear the Walking Dead's Maggie Grace, and Brian Baumgartner, who played Kevin on The Office. Suits LA premieres February 23rd on USA. For more showbiz fun, tune in to Nightlight with me, Pete Schwaba, weeknights from 6 to 8 p.m. on the Civic Media Radio Network.
We are going to put a tiny little pause on that warm-up that started yesterday. Today, partly cloudy to mostly sunny with a high right around 9 above. Tonight, mostly clear with a low dropping to 5 below tomorrow. Increasing clouds with a high to 20. We're back to 28 on Saturday. I'm meteorologist Sean Cable. Currently, it's 5 below.
That's your WLAK Daily News Roundup from Civic Media. Subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you find your podcasts. Find more news at lakeair.radio. The national news cycle never stops, but it can be hard to find news about your local community. Civic Media is dedicated to providing quality local and state news coverage across Wisconsin. With the Civic Media app, you can get notifications about local stories that matter to you and your community. Find the free Civic Media app in your phone's app store and choose notifications from the menu to tell us what kind of news you want to hear about.